Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to talk a little bit about the differences and similarities between these two watches here. On one side we have the Omega Seamaster 300, and on the other side the Omega Planet Ocean 8900 Master Coaxial version. A Master Chronometer, that is. These watches are very different, but they both have some shared joy, and I think they both merit consideration. First, one note though, this is the Planet Ocean 8900. It's using the 8900 movement, and what that means actually is it has some major differences in terms of size, in terms of clasp, and just frankly, it brings it a little bit more in line with the anti-magnetism of this guy over here. So do keep that in mind. And then there's only really one model of this guy, which I suppose could serve as a pro for you there. But first off, we'll talk about similarities here. They're both using master coaxial movements, which mean they are both very anti-magnetic, which is great. They both have an independent hour hand, which allows you to adjust the hour without losing the seconds or minutes hands. They are both on very nice bracelets with the Omega Quick Adjust system, which allows you to adjust the bracelet in and out without even taking the watch off your wrist, which is great. They are both more than a little bit overpriced, as you can tell by the little Omega up at the top here. Let's just be real here. But there are also substantial differences between them. And I'm going to talk about those differences in three groups. First off, differences that are kind of neutral, that don't really matter in one direction. Then advantages of the Planet Ocean. Then some advantages of the 300. Then I'll give my final conclusion, although yours could very much be different. In terms of the neutral differences, one of the big ones is actually the links here. This is using brushed links here. So you can see these are very reflective links, noticed by the fingerprints, whereas these are entirely brushed here. Did I say these were brushed? That's polished. This is brushed. I don't know. I can't talk. But whatever it is, this is actually going to be a major distinction because this guy is going to show wear a little bit readily, as well as oil and fingerprints and whatnot. But at the same time, it does look a little bit flashier when you are wearing it otherwise. So this is more a question of preference. And of course, you can always have this one brushed if that's your real desire here. A little harder to polish this guy up. Next thing, these do have a difference in their depth rating. This guy here, as we can see, has a 300-meter depth rating versus this guy here, which has, as you can see in the bottom here, a 600-meter depth rating. Now, okay, this difference is not meaningful to you. This is like having a kitchen table which can support the weight of 2 elephants rather than the weight of 1 elephant. This may be a factually true difference, but it doesn't matter at all. This is just overperformance for marketing's sake. Unless you are a crazy technical saturation diver, you will never ever reach this water resistance level unless you are dead and drifting to the bottom of the ocean. So you don't need to worry about that. They are both more than enough water resistant for any conceivable use that 99.99 some number of nines worth of the world will have. Then finally, one other difference is that the Planet Ocean actually does have a diver's extension, meaning you can pop this down and pop this out. Practically speaking, that is nice if you are actually planning to dive with the watch, so it can go on top of your wetsuit. But coupled with this little guy here, you get a fair amount of extra weight, or a fair amount of extra length if you need it there. The 300 does not, but it actually does have a smaller clasp, which is, sort of a win. So, that could go either way there. Kind of a wash, at least to my mind. So let's talk about the advantages of the Planet Ocean here. Okay, in terms of advantages for the Planet Ocean, one of the big ones is that this actually has a date window, whereas this does not. This sounds like a little thing, but it was actually something that frustrated me substantially as I was carrying this guy. To have to get your phone out every time you need to know the date is not something that's great. It does make it a little easier to reset this guy if it ever runs out of juice, so to speak, but, I definitely miss that. Next thing is that I love the blue dial option on the Planet Ocean here. This is a dial that is really kind of a chameleon. It can look black, gray, even teal, depending on the lighting, whereas this guy is just kind of black. You can get this guy in a black as well, but I love this option, and so it's something I recommend on a regular basis. Next thing, the Planet Ocean has a much more finished dial here. If we take a look here, you can see that each of the indices is actually applied and filled entirely with lume, as is the 12, the 9, the 6, as is the Omega symbol, as well as the Omega writing. There is a lot more polish here. There's a lot more application. There's a lot more going on in the dial. Whereas this guy, unfortunately, the dial is basically just paint. They have painted on, given it's an attractive dial, but it's just plastic with a little bit of lume paint on it. And that's not really so incredible to me. It also means that the dial on this guy is going to be more legible in low light conditions, because as you're using this guy, not only does the white lume help to provide a little bit more contrast than the vintage style lume, but you can also, even in dim conditions, get a little bit of reflection off of whatever is around you, and that can help you read the watch in a way that you might not be able to, given that you've got this matte dial here. So that's important very much, and the contrast really can't be overstated. You also have bigger plots of lume on the hands here, which is actually nice, particularly on the hour hand, although, of course, it's being covered up at the moment. But nonetheless, what that means is that it's going to be a little bit easier to see this even when the reflection is not working in your favor. You just see the white of the lume there. So, and then finally, speaking of lume, this guy just has substantially better lume. Although both of these should last all night, by the end of the night, this one's really a struggle, and this one's really just going strong. And so I appreciate very much that this is loomed like a dive watch. Even though this one also looks like a dive watch, it really isn't quite. So, anyways, to me, those are the advantages for the Planet Ocean. It's got the better lume, a more legible dial, a more finished-looking dial. The blue option is absolutely great, and it does have a date window, which is just spectacular. Let's talk about the advantages for the 300 here. Well, the biggest advantage for the 300 is that it's about $2,000 less at Omega's retail prices. You shouldn't be paying Omega's retail prices anyways, work with an authorized distributor. But look, that's a fair amount of freaking money there. And so $2,000 less is absolutely a big advantage, that's for sure. You also get more options with this little guy here. You can get a two-tone option with, rose gold, sedna gold, whatever they call it, coming down the center of the... It's a very attractive thing. And if you want to spend $66,000 on this guy, if you've got like Bruce Wayne money or something, well, by God, you can get one in platinum for $66,000. So you've got that option. Whereas there are fewer options for the Planet Ocean, and none of the precious metal stuff going on particularly. Well, you can get one with diamonds for some freaking reason. Whatever. This guy is also a little bit more low key. The Planet Ocean, although I love it very much, is a little bit sort of wow, look at me. Whereas this guy is a little bit less so. And so that can be a very nice thing if you're trying not to draw quite as much attention to yourself, although this is still very flashy, particularly with these polished links there. The matte dial is also a little bit less reflective, although it does mean that you see very clearly the reflection of the world in your dial, which is not necessarily something I like very much, but that's okay, and that's still kind of the case with this guy, which actually has a reflection, the reflective dial itself. So, a little bit of a wash there. The diver's bezel on this guy is actually nicer in terms of feel. I mean, both of them have very nice diver's bezels, but this has just a little bit nicer of a click feel to it. It feels a little bit more akin to what you get on something like Rolex, whereas this guy is a little bit more sloppy. And there's a little bit of back and forth play here that the Omega Boutique has assured me is completely normal, and in fact that I found in other Planet Oceans, but is not something I'm a big fan of, 100%. And so there you go. And then this guy does not have a helium escape valve in the side of it. That's this little thing right here. Look, this is not something you need. For the same reason you do not need 600 meters of water resistance, statistically speaking, you don't need a helium escape valve either. In practice, this is just something that will snag on things in your life, and if you accidentally open it, which can happen, it will lower the water resistance of the watch pretty substantially. That's about the only things that a helium escape valve will do for you if you are not a serious saturation diver, and statistically speaking, you are not. So that's an advantage, that it doesn't have that unnecessary feature that is just kind of there for marketing purposes, or for the 3 saturation divers who want to buy one of these guys. And then finally, on the good side, and maybe the best thing about this guy relative to the Planet Ocean is the size. Although, in terms of the dial themselves, they're relatively similar, at least for the 8900, in terms of like lug to lug and whatnot. This guy is way thicker, by a very, very large margin. I mean, even the bracelet on this guy is substantially thicker. This is a chubby bunny here, 100%. And so this guy is lighter, this guy is thinner, and it is just a little bit smaller in the dial. And that means that it is much less of a wrist hog, and it doesn't feel like you're wearing, weights or something for a workout when you've got this guy in your wrist. For me, at least, that's the biggest thing I missed taking this little guy off. This is a beefy freaking watch. And so, to me, at least, those are the advantages for the 300, is that the size is a little bit better for a lot of people. It doesn't have the helium escape valve, which you don't need on the Planet Ocean anyways. The diver's bezel feels a little bit nicer, with a little less play. The matte dial is going to be a little bit reflective. Less reflective, which is good. It is a little more low-key. You get more options if you want to go fancy with it, and it's about $2,000 less if you don't want to go fancy with it, which is great. For me, in terms of final conclusions, well, the Planet Ocean wins. I'd like to think that that's not just personal bias, given that I bought this guy instead of that guy, because actually these were the two I ultimately was torn against, and I want to thank very much my buddy Jim for loaning this along so I could do the comparison. But for me, I like this a little bit better because it is more legible, and that sort of across-the-room sense, this guy wins. It has a date window. The finishing on the dial is substantially nicer. The dial on this guy, at least to me, feels underdone, whereas on this guy it feels like, okay, they really put a lot of effort in there, and honestly, this just fits my style a little better. That said, the perfect wristwatch could very easily be the Planet Ocean dial and date and bezel with the size and thickness of this little guy. Because, oh man, I could definitely afford to this watch to lose a little bit of weight. But the thing is, at the same time, they're both great watches, and I can very easily see you going in either direction. This could be more your style. You might not miss the date window. You might like the polishing. And you might find the vintage sort of inspired look of this guy to be, oh my god, super compelling. But either way, I know which way I landed, but those are the substantial differences and similarities there, and I think you're going to be happy either direction. It's just going to be a matter of your personal taste. So there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.